Hello everyone. So this is going to be a video for beginners of Anvil. I'm saying it like this to begin with because if you're someone that's watched this channel at all for a past, you know that usually the videos on this channel pertain more towards speedrunning and the more veteran side of the games for people who have played it for a while to kind of learn builds, etc. This is not going to be aimed towards you at all. If you are one of those people, I highly recommend clicking off and going to do something else because most of the stuff you see in here, you're probably going to know already. This is hopefully going to help the newer players that are arriving to Anvil, if any at all, to kind of explain the systems in the game that don't get explained at all within Anvil. It's a shame that they don't explain that at all, really, because once you understand these systems, the game becomes much easier and much more rewarding when utilized correctly. So, in the picture on the top left here, you're going to see offensive, durability, and status multipliers. I have coded these different stat blocks with each of the stats to correspond to the text that you see on the screen here. This picture is going to be available in the description, so if you leave this video and don't quite remember it, instead of having to constantly come back and rewatch the video or try to answer any questions in the comments, etc., that you might have about it, I'm going to leave this as like a informational sheet in the description that you can quickly go click and look at the text yourself. That being said, if you wish to stick around for my descriptions and how these stats are important, welcome to the video, welcome to Anvil. I hope you have a fun time playing as much as I do. Starting with the offensive side of the tree, this is going to be stuff that's pertaining to increasing the damage of your breaker with just raw damage gains. The durability in the middle, this is all your survivability stuff to do with your breaker, being it movement speed or just ways of reducing damage taken or just increasing your max health. Status multipliers, these are the ways that you're going to really scale your damage being really big numbers in Anvil. This is probably the most important part to consider when it comes to your relic choices, and I will touch on that when we get to it last. So starting with offense, you're going to notice in each of these two stat blocks in durability and offensive, you're going to notice little blue check marks going through all these stats. This is the point where your breaker's base values begin. So for example, if you look at attack power, you can see it says I have 404, but then we have that blue line directly in the middle. That's because on Jungler, which is the character you can see in the background right now, I have a base attack power of 200. That blue line represents where that 200 mark is. This means when I pick up relics that say stuff like increase attack power by 20%, it's going to calculate from where that blue line is, not the additional attack power I've calculated along the way. This is very important to know because I've had like comments on the Reddit sometimes where people have been saying stuff. I have 600 odd attack power, I pick up 20%, and I'm definitely not getting 20% of the 600. Is the game bugged? No, that's because it calculates from this blue line, not the additive. To start with, you got attack power. Attack power increases the base damage of all your damage within the game, including the status effect of burn. This is an important stat, and definitely one that no matter what build and no matter what breaker you're playing, you really want to chase this stat. I have a video where I go into the damage breakdown of when I set the world record of the highest damage achieved within Anvil. This is pretty much the baseline of that. Any damage you get after this point will use attack power as a base value. Attack speed, this increases your fire rate and your swing rate of your weapons. This does not affect skills. As much as we would wish it would affect skills, I think it would be hilarious if it did, but it does not, unfortunately. This means if you have a standard rifle on jungler and you have a 200% attack speed, that standard rifle is going to be shooting 200% of its normal rate. It's very nice. This also affects sword-based weapons, caster-based weapons, the charged-based weapons that the light breakers can get, stuff like the broker cannon and the ranger cannon. It affects everything to do with your weapons, fire rate, and swing rate, but not their reload speed, unfortunately. Critical hit chance and critical damage are also things that we like to call intrinsic multipliers. These are things that multiply your damage based on the critical damage percentage, and you have a chance to multiply it by this percentage based on your critical hit chance percentage. This comes after your attack power and your weapon power and your skill power calculations, but is still before your global multipliers. Moving on to your weapon power and skill power, these will multiply and give you damage increase based on the percentage you see and based on the damage source. So if you're hitting with your weapons, so your standard rifle again, your weapon power percentage will be calculated. But now if you're hitting with something like your crossfire or your jungler mines, instead it's going to use your skill power percentage. It does not ever in any scenario ever in Anvil will it use both of these values as a way of calculating your damage. So far. I'm not talking for the future. If this ever changes, I will amend this and fix this video and release a new one. But so far, depending on the damage source, it's either one of these stats and never both. Reduce skill cooldown. This is as simple as it sounds. It just reduces the cooldown for your skills. So if you have, say, a 60-second cooldown, and then you have 50% in your cooldown reduction, that 60-second cooldown is instead going to be a 30-second cooldown. It's going to be very, very nice. You want to chase this stat as much as possible. Being able to spam your skills, even in a weapon-based build, is very nice. Some characters are made or broke by their skills. So even if you're playing a breaker that's very heavy dependent on weapon power, so someone like Liner, for example, you're still going to want some cooldown reduction because they get access to skill upgrades that can increase their critical chance to 100% when they throw down their crit wire, like their trip wires. I often refer to this as crit wire, as it's the main use of that ability. So being able to use that more often becomes very, very powerful. Ignore enemy defense. This does exactly what it says. You ignore that percentage of the enemy's defense value. Think of enemies much like breakers. They all have defense values. There's no way really in the game to see how much defense they have from how it feels and just time playing. It feels like the normal enemies you run into have around 30%, and then enemies like bosses and stuff that you run into will have around 40%, with certain phases increasing their defense to the defense cap, which is 90%. These are known as super armor phases, and having a way to reduce how much defense that they get by 30% is very, very nice. There are ways to increase your ignore enemy defense via relics like penetration rounds, or by utilizing skill effects like Sandman's Sand Snipe with an upgrade that removes the enemy defense value. It's very, very important and will contribute quite a lot more to your damage than most of these other stats probably will, as defense is a flat reduction rate. So bear that in mind when you start seeing bosses turn silver and turning gold, etc., and having these big super armor phases, why your damage is suddenly a lot less. Damage increase against bosses. This just increases your damage to the boss by whatever percentage value you have in there. It's an alright stat. It does do what it advertises. It is a very nice damage multiplier, but due to the fact that it's a tier 1 relic and something that's hard to really chase, we don't prioritize it too much over the things that we can guarantee. Moving over to the durability tree. Here we have max HP, we have defense, melee damage taken reduction, range damage taken reduction, movement speed, reduced status effect duration, survivor skill cooldown decrease, and increased recovery amount. Max HP is exactly as it sounds. This is just the health of your breaker. All breakers, I shouldn't say all. Most breakers have different health values, so like the health of medium style breakers, so this being stuff like Liner, Draken, Sandman, etc., all are roughly around the same. And then you have Lightning, who's a little bit less, around 25k, along with Uzi, who has 25k. These are nice stats to contribute to your damage in ways that are usually not as you would think. There is a relic in the game called Necklace of Giant Strength. This will take your health and turn some of that into attack power. It's very nice. Unfortunately, there is no ways to increase your max HP outside of the seasonal upgrade tree anymore. There used to be relics in the game that would increase your health. They have long since sunset them and no longer obtainable in your runs. It's not a big loss. We didn't really pick them up anyway. They were usually like a very low end of our priority of picking up in runs, as you're swiftly going to learn when you're playing Anvil, as you get to the higher difficulties, any of these stats that increase your durability and in your defense are useless when you get hit for damage that exceeds any of these health stats and damage reduction stats reduction rates. We tend to look at these metrics as a way of further increasing damage. So what I mean by that is, again, Necklace of Giant Strength, but also your defense stat. Your defense stat reduces the damage you take by a flat percentage. Sorry. So if you get hit for 100,000 and then you have 30% defense reduction, you're going to remove 30% of the 100,000, which is 30,000, away from that. So you only end up getting hit for 70,000. Now, again, Notice how 30% defense reduction against 100,000 hit is still not enough to save even my breaker that I have right here. This is why we don't prioritize these stats. But instead, what we look at is some breakers have ways to increase their defense via using skills. A prime example of this will be someone like Lightning, who can get a Lightning Slide upgrade that increases your defense by 200%. This will not make your defense 230%. Instead, it will take 200% of 30 and then add that on. So instead, you'll end up with 90% damage reduction. This can make you a little bit tankier, but instead we like to use this in with tandem with some relics that you can pick up in the run, something like Defense Suit of Retaliation, which will take your defense and add it onto your attack power. Now your melee damage reduction, range damage taken reduction, these are just ways of reducing your damage by whatever percentage you see there from whatever damage source is hitting you. So if you're getting meleeed, it will reduce it by the 10% that you see in the sheet, or it will reduce it by 10% in the sheet if you're getting hit by a ranged damage attack. Again, these metrics aren't great. Don't chase them. They're not going to save you, and it's just a waste of money going forward. You could go out and experiment and feel it for yourself, but after playing this game for a long time, I assure you, it's not going to save you. Movement speed. Now, this is a stat that can actually save you. If you never get hit, you never take damage. Now, that's a big brain moment. What I mean by this is movement speed affects just how fast you move within the game, including your strafe speed while shooting. So if a boss is coming in and it's going to slam attack and you're strafing, the extra little 20% movement speed you see I have in this sheet could make or break me being clipped by an attack and taking that 120k hit, or taking no damage by just managing to strafe out of it in the first place. It's very nice. Also, in a speedrun setting, it just means how fast you get to certain places in general. So if I wanted to get across the map, I'm going to get there 20% faster because I have 120% movement speed, while someone else is probably only going to have 100% movement speed. This isn't a stat really that we're going to chase too much in our run, but we will pick up the 20% in our seasonal upgrade tree because, well, eventually you'll have everything in your upgrade tree anyway. But again, the 20% that is in the tree does make a big difference in your survivability whilst learning. Reduce status effect duration. This actually just reduces the status effect durations present on your character. What I mean by this is, say a boss hits you with a freezing attack and it freezes you for 10 seconds. Well, I have 30% status effect duration reduction in my tree on this durability page. So instead of freezing me for 10 seconds, it's going to only freeze me for 7. It's very, very nice. Again, not a stat we chase too much, but we're not sad about having it. Now, survival skill cooldown decrease. This is a very, very good stat. Whenever you use a survival skill within Anvil, you are giving something that is called a iframe, an immunity frame. These frames make it so whilst you're within that frame, you are immune to all damage. This is very big. Some breakers can just spam their survival skill. Some breakers have a guard attack, which kind of just raises like a shield around them, and whilst that shield's active, they will not take damage. Having 20% in this survival skill cooldown decrease will just mean I'll be able to use my dashes more often on a breaker like Jungler. It just means I'll be able to use my counterattacks and my guards more often on the heavier breakers, as well as my teleport skills on my lightweight breakers. It's a very nice stat. Don't over prioritize into it. You don't need too much of it. Again, we don't want to sacrifice too much by going into durability when we could be getting offensive stuff. Increased recovery amount. This only increases the healing we receive and not the healing we do. I'm saying it like this because I get many questions on Reddit sometimes about Shuri and her healing circle. If you want to increase how much healing people receive from your Shuri circles, that person receiving the healing needs to increase their recovery amount. Shuri can help this by picking up her skill upgrades that does increase the healing, but in a raw statistical value, for someone to receive more healing from Shuri, they have to increase their own recovery amount. This stat does also affect how much healing you get from stuff like the pumpkin candy relics that give you health regen over 5 seconds. And it also affects the seasonal upgrade tree node that also gives you health regen over 5 seconds. Very nice stat. Not too important to chase, but we're not sad about the fact that we get 50% for free from our seasonal tree. It's very, very nice and will save you money in the long run by having it in the seasonal tree, as you're not having to spend money on those healing effects. Coming across to the status multipliers. this tree is all global multipliers. These are going to take any damage you do and multiply it by the percentage you see. So what I mean is, say you just did a hit after calculating all of this offensive stuff that I previously mentioned, and you suddenly hit for 20k, like 20,000, sorry. Let's use a better number. You suddenly hit for 10,000 to make it a little bit easier, and you have 100% in, say, burn target, and the boss is on fire. That 10,000 is now becoming 20,000. Now, this gets really crazy when you start pairing these together and really taking advantage of how these actually function. Now, these status effects also have their own effects. This isn't going to be a video about that, though, because this is going to be a longer video if I do that. I do have a separate video on the channel pertaining to each of the status effects and how they operate, and as well as just what they do and a way that you can utilize them. I suggest checking that out after this video if you are curious. But starting from the top of this tree, you have damage increase to all targets with status effects. This is worded a little bit poorly. They could have done a much better job explaining this stat to new players, because a lot of people seem to get confused by this. But in a sense, what this actually means is damage increase to all targets with status effect actually means damage increase to targets for each currently active status effect. Now, what I mean by that is, say you have 50% in here, and then you set the target on fire, you're going to be doing 50% towards that target because it's on fire. But now let's say you set it on fire and freeze it. You're going to be doing the 50% for the burn and the 50% for the freeze. This becomes very powerful because now that's a 100% multiplier just for applying two statuses. This gets really, really crazy when you start applying the burn, the freeze, the petrify, the shock, the poison, and the bleed all at once. You then get 50% for each of them. It will be huge. Especially when you then consider the specific targets. What I mean by this is, you have your burn target, you have a frozen target, you have a petrified target, you have a shock target, a poison target, and a bleeding target. These will only increase your damage as long as the enemy is under that specific status effect. So if you have 50% in burn and a 50% in this all status up here, and then you set the target on fire, you'll be getting 50% from the burn and the 50% from the all status. But now let's say you have 0% in freeze, 50% in burn, and 50% in all target, and then you burn and freeze the enemy, you'll be getting 100% on from burn because of the 50% in all target, the 50% in burn, but then you would only be getting 50% for the freeze because you have 0% in freeze target. If that doesn't make sense, I also have a video where I break down calculations in the game, and I also go over that inside the status effect video I previously mentioned. Please check that out. But to summarize this tree and how to really utilize it, you want to be looking at your breakers and getting an idea of what your breaker is bringing. So if you're playing someone like jungler, they innately, as in they already have available to them, burn. So you want to start tracking down these burn targets. Burn targets are going to multiply your damage when you set fire to those enemies. And also tracking down the status effect target relic within the game and the status effect shield relic within the game. That's increased this stat value up here. You can also get various reactors within the game, which will apply these other statuses to the target when you hit 10 times. These are really, really, really handy, but usually kind of hard to apply unless you have something that can hit multiple times, as it's just not very consistent. These being things like venom rifles, those are being very nice to use. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope this has helped explain some of these stats and kind of give clarity on it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave questions in the comments. I will try to answer when I best can. I will also leave a link to this picture in the description of the video in case you need a visual representative of what these stats do and how to kind of prioritize what you want to look for. But yeah, I'll be doing more of these beginner type videos going forward, pertaining to stuff like seasonal upgrade tree, how you want to upgrade it, as well as kind of doing a walkthrough of some of the runs as well, and going through each galaxy and completing it once, just to kind of give a walkthrough of how to posture yourself and think about your choices within your run. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.